first, the Prime Minister's announcement today that the so-called National Cabinet process will become permanent is a welcome admission that our federation needs fixing. The basic problem is that the Commonwealth raises most of the money, but the states deliver most of the services you use on a daily basis. So whenever, say, public hospitals or public schools need to perform better, the states just say that the Commonwealth must fund them more, even though both of these things, hospitals and schools, were originally a state-only responsibility. But that's not where we are in this modern political era where money gets thrown around to make headlines disappear. No one really wonders or bothers to check if something actually gets fixed. So we have all the usual state-federal argy-bargy, and inevitably the Commonwealth does pay more. But when nothing changes much, the Commonwealth says it's the state's fault for being inefficient, and the states just say it's the Commonwealth for not giving them enough money in the first place. Almost lost in Scott Morrison's announcement of new structures and new processes was today's announcement, in the middle of it all, that an extra $131 billion is there for public hospitals. Now, that's an eye-watering spend on top of the $8 billion that was given to them at the start of this pandemic so that they could cope, even though tonight, as it stands, just 2 corona cases, just 2, are on ventilators. You see, the only time our federation seems to work is when the Commonwealth is spending even more money to enable the states to do the job they're supposed to do anyway. Back in 2013, the Abbott government was elected with a mandate from voters to try and fix the federation, and it set up 2 white paper processes, one on tax reform and the other on federation form, in the hope that each level of government might raise the money it spent itself, and that the responsibilities of each level of government, who did what, might be clarified and adjusted to better reflect modern realities. The former PM's basic idea was that public schools and public hospitals would become solely the responsibility of the states, and that in return, the federal government might take over some of the states' other responsibilities, things like preschool and TAFE and public housing, so that what the states got from their own taxes and from the GST would fully cover the services they're meant to deliver. So an end to the name calling and the blame gaming and all the demands for more and more money from the taxpayer. But of course, Abbott's reforms were binned by his successor, Malcolm Turnbull. So now Scott Morrison's determined to have a go at ending the blame game and getting the states and the Commonwealth to work better together. In the old days, we used to have an annual Premiers' Conference, and back then the states, of course, were grown-ups, so once a year. In 1992, that all changed, and the Council of Australian Governments was created by the then Prime Minister Paul Keating, with a COAG meeting twice a year. After today, well, all of that's gone, and these new national cabinets, well, they're going to meet once a month. The Prime Minister says he wants more congestion busting, more problem solving, and the ending of endless meetings, fewer endless meetings. His hope, of course, is that 20 ministerial forums, the current 9 ministerial regulatory councils, and all of that will be consolidated into just a number of councils. So 29 talkfests, he says, down to 10. I tell you what, let's hope he's right. And if there's a reduction in waste and duplication, if all that happens, well, great. But I do want to observe the National Cabinet that was so united in dealing with the health crisis by shutting down the economy and spending record amounts of your money, well, it hasn't been so united in starting it all up again. And this is less likely to be so when the handouts stop. As Paul Keating once said, never get between a premier and a bucket of money. Premiers are great at spending money that Prime Ministers have to raise. So if entrenching this National Cabinet process makes premiers more accountable, and if it subjects the states to more scrutiny, well, it's got my support. But if it means that even less gets done at any level of government unless all levels agree, well, I reckon it'll make the problems worse, not better. You see, a cabinet only works if every member is bound by the collective decision. And the only national cabinet decisions that any of the premiers have followed are the ones they actually agree with. It's worked where there's more money for them, hasn't it? But it hasn't worked on schools and it hasn't worked on borders. Without collective responsibility, and that's by far the most important principle behind a cabinet, this old COAG will only ever be not much more than a leaders' meeting, not a true national cabinet. And in the end, I have to say frankly, why would a Prime Minister then, on that scenario, subject his authority to the veto of premiers?